Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is March 8th, 2023. This is the full board meeting of the Board of Education for the School District of Waukesha. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Sue, would you please take the roll call?
Mark Borowski.
Here.
Corey Montiel.
Here.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Here.
Markel Moore.
Here.
Joseph Como.
Here.
Patrick McCaffrey.
Here.
Anthony Zenobia.
Here.
Karen Robertson.
Here.
Kelly Piasek.
Here. And Ms. Ettinger, can you please verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
Thank you very much. We don't have bright lights tonight, but we do have a staff recognition, so I'll turn it right over to Mrs. Thede.
Good evening, everyone. So, the Employee Recognition Award for March of 2023 is going to be presented this evening to Brian Yearling. So, Brian, please stand up. So Brian started in the School District of Waukesha in 2010, and he's currently the Instructional Technology Coordinator for the South Region. Mr. Yearling's nominators begin by saying that they have witnessed many effective teachers over the years and that Brian rises to the top of this distinguished group. He has a true gift of lighting up the learning community with his joy and passion for creating innovative learning spaces designed to ignite curiosity and fan the flame of ingenuity. Brian has gone over and above to improve learning experiences and outcomes for students. He has been involved from designing to implementing creative spaces with the latest technology, tools, and materials for student use. He spends a vast amount of time familiarizing himself with learning all the new items recently purchased for students at East. He has worked with individual, small and large groups of students and staff in learning the skills needed to produce quality work and work products. Brian has a love of teaching and wants all students to embrace their uniqueness and develop into the best versions of themselves. In the area of physical education, technology has implemented differently compared to a traditional academic settings, many times requiring extra creativity and thought. Recently, Brian was contacted on an issue that the Phi-Ed teachers were having with a spreadsheet used by students and teachers in elementary physical education. Brian came up with an idea of putting a challenge or contest out to the high school students. He put together a design brief that included an overview of the project, the goals, and specific specifications for the app. The winning app in this contest would be forwarded for consideration to be used by our district elementary students and teachers in class. This unique idea and extra work that Brian has done for the PE department will ultimately lead to a new app being developed by high school students to be used by our elementary students and staff in physical education class. It will assist in allowing students to easily enter and score the results and making it more exciting for the students to save time for teaching staff as well. In addition, by utilizing our high school students' app design abilities, he's tapping into our own talent pool and giving them a real-world project. So on behalf of the School District of Waukesha, I'd like to congratulate Brian Yearling on being selected to receive the Employee Recognition Award.
Thanks. I really appreciate this. It's nice to hear that the work that you do every day matters and that people see the good work. I'm part of a impactful 3-person team, an instructional technology coordinator, and as I've said to both of them, Wendy's here tonight, but as I've said to both Wendy and Kristen, I am no more deserving than they are. We do this work every day to give students engaging experiences in school. And when I left the high school English classroom, I had this really big decision to make, which was, can I impact more students than I do today doing the work that I'm moving into in this new role? And so it's nice to hear that I am having that impact and that that we're moving in that direction, but it doesn't happen without teachers who are willing to make the moves and allow us to come through the door and coach and try new things for students. So they're really the heroes, and they're the ones who make this job pretty exciting to do. So thank you for this, though.
Congratulations again. All right. We are excited to welcome tonight students from South High School for an update. We have student representatives Ellie Haddon and Nakiria Hobson. Welcome.
Hi everyone, we're happy to be back. So I'm Elle Haddon. And I'm Nakiria Hobson.
Hold on, give me a minute. I'm trying to fix this.
It'll be fine. We'll just okay. Hello? Cool. So we just going through a few highlights that's been happening so far this semester at school. So we actually just finished up our winter play. The Black Shirts Drama Department did a phenomenal job. They did a similar story to the Disney Cinderella. This is a Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella, so it has the same colorful and flashy ensemble as you can see in the picture, filled with knights, peasants, magically transforming animals, and more that do really transform each scene into a beautiful fairy tale. This was an amazing show. I really hope that I think they have a recording, but they did an amazing job, and just a huge congratulations to our crew. Phenomenal.
Next up, we have the academic decathlon team. They competed in the decathlon regional at Carroll University, and they did very well, especially as this was many members' first year. Isabel B. took second place in her division in the essay competition, and Ethan V. took third place in his division in the economics competition. Then next we have the DECA, and so the sophomores, how do you say it? Anaya, I don't want to say it wrong. Anaya Srinivas and Sophia Antheline qualified for the International Career Development Conference in Orlando, Florida, and they placed fourth in the marketing management team decision-making event at the state competition in Lake Geneva.
Next up, we have our mock trial team. They just attended state and they just won. They will be going to nationals in May. This is a huge achievement for these amazing kids. So we have Reed Mueller and Talani Sopow, and these two were both named outstanding attorneys. And I specifically asked them and what their favorite thing about was winning outstanding attorney was. Talani said it was the fact that my team was so supportive, and I was so shocked and was so expecting not to win anything. And Reed said, the best part was the immediate reaction of my team cheering and supporting me. So this team is supporting each other all the time, and when they announced the winners, I have so many videos and I watched so many videos. Everyone was like so shocked, like their facial expressions was so like, it was just filled like pure excitement. So I'm so proud of them. And so being named outstanding attorney, again, I said this our last meeting, is already an insane achievement, but now having two on the same team is extremely rare. So we are wishing them the best of luck at nationals.
Next up, we have the gymnastics co-op, and they qualified for state. Julia Stillman qualified for state from South, and she qualified based off of the floor exercise, the uneven bars, and will contend for the state all around. She placed 10th in state, and she was the sectional champ.
So we have our varsity cheers next. We are now 4 times state champions in the co-ed division. This is a super insane achievement for 4 years in a row. Our Waukesha South cheer team is amazing, and a special congratulations to Tali Wallenberg for making the all-state tumble team, and congratulations to our co-ed stunt group, Shaden, Angel, and Riley, for placing first.
The black shirt wrestlers are also going to state. We have Jimmy Wallenberg, CJ Johnson, Robert Sevakal, and Kai Beckley. And Kai made history as Waukesha South's first female wrestler to qualify for state. and it was 7 out of 11 of the wrestlers who qualified for sectionals, and Kai Beckley got 2 pins at the meet.
Up next, we have our powerlifting program. So this is the second year of this program, and Nigeria is actually on the team, and I will get there in a second. But we already have a ton of participants and qualifiers in general. So state powerlifting was this last weekend up in Appleton, and our qualifiers include Nigeria Hobson, Jamie Hobson, Tyler Williams, Shaden Welty, Angel Hernandez, Hallie Newman, Brenda Asiano, and Kyla Arison. So that was already, what was it? That was our second year doing state. So we actually have a new qualifier. It's our first time doing nationals, and it's going to be held at Myrtle Beach around March 30th and April 2nd. And these qualifiers include Caitlin Jackwick, Callie Jackwick, Jamie Hobson, Anthony Dazinski, Tyler Williams, Hallie Newman, Brenda Asiano, Manny Rivera, Kyla Aronson, and Jeremiah Summers. We are so excited to see how they do too. Next, we have our National Signing Days. So we actually had 6 athletes from the class of 2023 sign February 1st on National Signing Day. These are all commits. We want to play sports at the collegiate level. So the students pictured are Sierra Langcap. This is left to right. Sierra Langcap, she's going to Carroll University for lacrosse. CJ Johnson, who is going to St. Thomas University for football. Maddie Berger, University of Indianapolis for volleyball. Tak Tadioka, also going to St. Thomas University for football. Me, El Haddon, going to Albright University for volleyball. And Eric Teagues going to Beloit College for baseball. We are so excited to see the rest of the commits this spring.
Also, the Waukesha South Band is going to perform at the inauguration, and the Blackshore Band members reflect on the opportunity to play at the inauguration and how far our band family has come. We would also like to give a congratulations to Tyler and Quentin from Waukesha South High School for qualifying and competing in last Friday's Technicians of Tomorrow competition. The two competed against other high school automotive technology students in a written and hands-on skills competition at the Wisconsin Center in Milwaukee. Thank you, Griffin Ford, for supporting the program, and Service Manager Ben and Shop Foreman Tyler for all they do.
We now have our 2023 Scholastic Art Awards. So Scholastics was founded in 1923. This award is the nation's longest running, most prestigious, educational, innovative, supporting student achievement in the visual art and literary arts. So we actually have gold and silver keys as well as honorable mentions. This provides students with a life-changing recognition, scholarships, and a platform for their voices to be heard. So just some statistics here. We have 5 to 7% of submissions are recognized for gold keys, 7 to 10% are recognized for silver keys, and 10 to 15% are recognized for honorable mentions. So just that our school has a lot of participants and a lot of mentions is pretty amazing. So huge congratulations to the following. We have sophomore Nora Cabillas, junior Jenna Weiss, Addison Berry, Soraya Campbell, Brenda Gonzalez, Lizzie Kai, Cheyenne Lehman, Isabel Regalado, and then seniors, Nigeria Hobson, me, El Haddon, and then we have Lauren Zabigan.
We recently had a week to celebrate inclusion at South. We had a spirit week where we wore crazy socks for Down syndrome awareness, and we said a lot of quotes inspired by inclusion.
Now we have the South Engineering Academy female students of FEMAID, and they visited the Eaton and Generac. These students met and heard from a large female engineer panel at Eaton. They were surprised by the many different types of engineers and employment opportunities for them in the field. Some of the different engineering areas covered were application, finance, design, project management, operational, developer, IT, and the technical training. So at Generac, they met with the VP and 3 female engineers. The panel presented information about career paths, a typical day in their job, and recommendations to further their successes in the engineering field. Then they went on the plant tour and saw how everything came together. Special thank you to the Eaton and Generac Power Systems Incorporation for helping them make this day a successful, and for allowing us to take students on such an important learning experience. It was definitely a fun and inspiring day for these young women. We also have our students of the second quarter, so congratulations to the students. They're on the screen. We don't have names, but really good job. The students nominated them for various reasons, including positivity, enthusiasm, academic excellence, generosity, effort, and leadership.
We happen to have a very wide group of smart students at South. 50% of all students achieved honor roll or high honor roll during first semester. 428 students, to be exact, had high honor roll, and 208 students got on honor roll.
That concludes our presentation. We would also really appreciate it if you guys follow the different academies on social media to keep everyone updated on everything that we're doing at school. So, thank you.
Very nice. Comes with a warning that if you follow you guys on social media, it totally clogs up your feed because there's so much stuff going on. It's been really impressive. Like every day there's 3 or 4 more things. So very nicely done. What questions do you guys have? Anything? Who are you? Mr. Zenobia.
So I was curious, you said that you were in the powerlifting competition, correct?
Yeah.
And how much did you lift?
So for squat, I did 225 pounds, and for bench, I PR'd for 126.5 pounds, and then for deadlift, I only got to 275, but I could have probably went higher.
Only.
Wow. Impressive.
That is impressive. You know, we had your cheer team here last year to celebrate the unprecedented 3 in a row, and now 4 in a row.
4.
Really impressive. And the academics. So if anybody is underestimating South, I think that's a big mistake. Anything else? We're really proud of you guys. Congratulations on all your accomplishments, and thank you again for being here. Great. We are now at the section of our meeting where there's an opportunity for citizens to speak. We have 5 speakers tonight. We will notify the speakers at 3 minutes and ask that you finish up your comments in the next 2 minutes. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language, and to be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience. The school board does not endorse any comments made by members of the community here tonight. We'd like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others and that our children are watching. We commit to communicating with you in respectful and productive ways and ask that you do the same. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience. Visual aids cannot be used in the area behind the speaker, and the podium will be clear during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speakers and our meeting participants, please silence your cell phones. Our first speaker tonight is Paul Reese, followed by Monica Whaley.
Good evening. When it comes to issues like reviewing library materials, this board has been has acted with more integrity than the board did just a few years ago. I've been here for more than 5 minutes. I've been coming here for years, and I've seen the stuff that this board has pulled in the past. And one of the things was, if there was a security committee, and the recommendation came out of this committee, and the recommendation came with for a certain subject, and the motion was made on it, and it was seconded, and the discussion came up, and it was an amendment was offered to this motion, and the amendment took the motion, the original motion, and stripped it completely and changed it utterly, and was seconded and passed without any notice really given to the public. It was done in a way so to get around having to list something, having it come changed, the recommendation that came out of committee, And to get around that, and it was so confusing, sitting here talking about it, Sue was so confused on how it was going down, where the second came from and how it was being done. And so I've seen the board do stuff like that in the past, and I've seen how underhanded it can be when it wants to do something, and nobody had a problem with that at that time. And then a couple of years ago, we had an August meeting about whether or not we were going to go back to school. And we went through, this board district went through sending out information, surveys to parents, what they wanted to do, how they wanted to do this, if they wanted to go back to school face-to-face, full-time, or if they wanted to go just to have their kids do online learning, what was done, what they wanted. They asked, the board went through this openly and asked the community exactly what it wanted to do. And when certain board members didn't like the results, they changed it at 11 o'clock at night. It got changed. And a motion was made to go to a hybrid. And the thing about it was good enough for our kids to go to school face-to-face in elementary school 5 days a week. That was fine, and it was safe for them. But for middle school and high school, we denied them that opportunity, and they got 4 days a week. 2 days a week. It was 4 days that the schools were open, but half kids went one day and half the kids went the other day. And that was not proposed, and not anybody in the community was ever made aware of this. And that was done. So when this board gets attacked like it's done something hidden or behind closed doors or there's something, it's absolutely ludicrous. I've been here a long time and it's done this type of thing is consistent with how this board has acted when it's acted in good faith. And that hasn't always been the case, and in my opinion of the way this board has acted in the past. So I just wanted to give my opinion on what I've seen and how this board has acted, and I think it's acted with great integrity, and I'm very pleased with the way you go about these things. One other thing is tonight you're going to talk about the library issue, and there's an issue about making the books come back you get 3-year waiting period before you can do it, bring it up again. And I think that's too long. I think it should be 1 year, and the reason being, if by chance it's a hot button issue, if by odd chance that would be, the next board would have the opportunity to look at it. Someone could bring it back and bring it up, so the next board would have the opportunity to re-examine it. You could change the policy at that time, whatever, but it would do it now just in case, and who knows what tomorrow brings. That is unknown. But I'm just saying that it would be good for if it was, and the year was June, so that after the election, it could be reviewed again if someone so felt compelled to do so. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Monica Whaley, followed by Susie Nietzsche.
Hypocrisy 3.0. At the beginning of every meeting for committees and board, the district directive regarding public comment is read. In part, it states to refrain from any inappropriate language, to be respectful in comments, to direct comments to the board and not the audience. However, our president has failed on numerous occasions to enforce this fairly and consistently. How many times have Ammo Andy and others vilified, slandered, personally attacked, and spewed pornographic garbage while speaking without any recourse? Our public school board banning books, eliminating open forum, discussions, and oversight to kowtow to the radical right agenda, of which our president declines knowledge of. Number 3, the parental rights resolution where only a few parents can decide what is right for all students. Parents should be able to make decisions for their children, not other people's children. Creating more policies that restrict the rights of marginalized students, knowing that bullying and abuse in the school is on the increase. Targeting LGBTQ students whose suicidal ideations and attempts are skyrocketing. The CDC recently released the ABES National Survey of Students while at home during COVID. 55% of the students reported they experienced emotional abuse by a parent or another adult in the home. 11% experienced physical abuse from a parent or an adult at home. LGBTQ students reported even higher incidences, including more suicide attempts. Statistics show that if there's just one trusted adult in an LGBTQ student's life, the chances of suicide decrease by 40%. As much as we want to believe all parents in homes are safe, we know in fact that they're not. Number 4, the letters regarding parental rights that our superintendent sent out to staff and families couldn't be more different. His letter to families states, during the current school year, we have received inquiries to how students' name can be changed in IC. I call BS. The change, in fact, stems from homophobic parents demanding that teachers can no longer respect the chosen name and pronouns students have trusted them with, remembering that school may be their only safe space. As much as you claim to be transparent, your hypocrisy is what shines through.
Thank you. Susie Nietzsche, followed by Mitzi Keetle.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to start again by thanking all of you for your hard work and dedication for our district. I appreciate all you have done to improve outcomes for students, but I especially want to thank you for what you have done for parents. Having a voice in my child's school life is the utmost importance and the best direction for all children. I cannot stress a thank you enough for allowing us parents to make decisions for our minor children. I worked in mental health for many, many, many years. I keep hearing people saying that students are going to commit suicide and they're going to die if they don't get certain things at this school. This is why the parents need to be notified, because if their child is truly going to commit suicide or threatening, they need help, and the parents need to get them that help. A teacher can't get them that help. A parent has to get their minor children help. So definitely keep up the parent notifications in the schools. I'm just going to touch a little bit about the books. I don't care if it's one book, 100 or 500 books. One book is too many to risk our children seeing porn. I hear week after week to leave our books alone and let the parents decide on what books their kids can read. Why do they want to subject their children to filth? I don't understand it. I think that we should shut down any books entering our schools or libraries until they're approved by this board, or have parents go in and actually physically read these books, and I know a whole bunch of parents that would be willing to do this. Thank you again, and thank you, Sue, for all your hard work, and good luck. Thank you. Karen, thank you, Karen, for all your hard work, and Joe, thank you.
Thank you. Mitzi Keetle, followed by Sarah Harrison.
Thank you. I truly appreciated the serious discussion last night at the TNL committee meeting around the library concerns policy. And to Mr. Como for planning to lift it up out of the consent agenda for tonight. I don't feel that there should be any action on that tonight. The board has had less than 24 hours to review a complex document where significant changes have been made, and as a member of the public, I could find no updated posting of the revisions online today. There are still shortcomings in the revisions, primarily that no one in the public other than the complainant knows that materials are being questioned for possible removal from the educational environment until that decision has been posted on the library concerns section. Not an easy to find place. You go to the website, the menu, library catalog, and then finally you have to go into library concerns yet to get to a spreadsheet. You do have easily posted a 3-page parental rights and transparency resolution, which includes this language. Parents have the right to know what resources are provided to or accessed by their child. including library materials, online resources, and digital media, and to inspect such materials to be assured they are relevant, age-appropriate, and not deemed harmful to minors. I would argue that that would include, for all parents, notification of the materials which someone else is finding damaging. I do have a strong confidence in the group of professionals outlined in the policies who then would be tasked to handle the concerns which are not informally resolved at the school level. Yet, the public should know something is occurring. Letter C, page 4 of the posted original policy stipulates that if the process continues to the board level, Policy 8309 will be followed for open public meetings. It was inferred last night that this would continue, but needs to clearly appear in the revision language.
2 minutes.
Also on page 4, step 6 is where it originally stated the complainant or any other employee or resident may appeal the decision of the consideration committee, old language, and to be submitted within 20 school days. I know you had discussion about timeline last night, and I would just ask that you think about that response time is really important to everyone who have such busy lives. The newest revisions deny the public, and especially parents, opportunities to be part of directing the education of their children. The phrasing that you stand staunchly on. If the intent is really to ensure age-appropriate, safe materials, why would you have less eyes involved rather than more? Thank you.
Our last speaker tonight is Sarah Harrison.
Thank you. I expressed my concern with the library materials complaint process on February 7th via an email to all board members. Dr. Siebert and Dr. Cook were both on copy. This was on February 7th. I have received 0 responses. Sorry, I can't make it to every meeting, guys. Here's my email. SDW Board, tonight policy 9130.01 is on the T&L agenda for approval. Processing such complaints is discussed in the LMS handbook in section 6. The process can result in a variety of actions, from retaining materials as is to the removal of materials because it is determined that the material is deemed harmful to minors. The complaint process is not public and is inaccessible for parents unless there is an appeal submitted following the decision. Draft policy 9310.01 states that the review process follows policy 2521 and that the appeals process follows policy 8309. Policy 2521 does not call for public review of materials or changes requested of materials outside of a periodic board review of curriculum. I assume those periodic reviews would include discussions at meetings available to the public as it has been in the recent past. That would not be the case for these library materials. Policy 8309 requiring open meetings available to the public is only mentioned in the case that the complainant submits an appeal to the decision made by the superintendent. This means the process is absolutely not transparent. It is behind closed doors. If the complainant is satisfied with the committee or superintendent's decision, no one else will see it. As a parent, I would not know that a book was removed from access that my child could have accessed before. I trust that since you are all so committed to curriculum transparency, as described in the Parental Rights and Transparency Resolution that you recently passed, that you wish for parents to retain visibility to this process. I look to you to add publicly available, accessible meetings prior to changing access levels to these materials. I'm quite certain this exclusion was an oversight. In the updated draft, it actually removes the statement that material which has been acquired will continue to be used during the review process, which to me leads me to think you're going to remove it from the classroom without the review process and see how it goes. You're no longer held to that standard.
2 minutes.
This statement is, however, still included. The board and school district does not discriminate in any of its selection and evaluation of resources pursuant to Policy 2260, non-discrimination and access to equal educational opportunity. There are many sub-bullets under this statement on this policy. The most relevant is one that states specifically that these classes include sexual orientation and sex, including gender status, change of sex or gender identity. Great. So in other words, books that merely acknowledge the presence of LGBTQ people in our diverse, lovely society will not be taken from the shelves, because that would be biased now, wouldn't it? And we wouldn't want to put the school at legal risk. I've seen at least one sitting board member state that they wish to do harm to public schools, but I'm certain the majority of you do not wish that. I'm certain that you do not have that malice toward the public education institutions in our school district. I do want to bring up one other thing while we're talking about transparency. I did bring up in January that there is a strong link between the parental rights and transparency
30 seconds.
resolution brought to School District of Waukesha and multiple GOP actions. And Dr. Piasek, you stated you were not aware of any Republican playbook, so I would love to direct you to the bill S3218, Parental Bill Rights Act of 2021, introduced by Josh Hawley. There's also a Wisconsin bill, AB 963, introduced by 12 Republican representatives in the Wisconsin State Assembly and 4 Wisconsin state senators. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our first action item tonight, we have minute approval. We have 4 sets of minutes for your consideration tonight. We have the February 8th regular board meeting, February 8th executive session, February 13th attachment detachment hearing, and the February 23rd executive session and expulsion hearing.
I'll move to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Montijo.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Kozlowski. Any questions, modifications, or concerns? All right, Sue, would you take the vote, please?
Corey Montijo?
Aye.
Mark Borowski?
Aye.
Patrick McCaffrey?
Aye.
Karen Robertson?
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia?
Aye.
Markel Moore?
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski?
Aye.
Joseph Como?
Aye.
Kelly Piasek?
Aye, passes 9-0. Thank you. Moving on, we have our WEFT report. Mr. Borowski.
All right, thank you, Dr. Piasek. The WEFT board last met on March 2nd, and, well, here we go again with the Evening for Education. As you know, it's been rescheduled for tomorrow evening. Definitely very much looking forward to that, and we do have a record number of seats that have been reserved for the event, and we're not inviting Mother Nature. Hopefully not. We do also just want to express our thanks to many of the people on the board that are coming. WEFT does realize it's been quite a week for meetings, committees, board meeting tonight, and then the event tomorrow, so hopefully we can all enjoy it a little bit as far as a social event. Let's see. Our 2023 grant window is open until April 7th, so just about a month left to get your grant proposals in. District employees are eligible to apply, of course, and our board has approved the grant amount for 2023. That amount is going to be announced tomorrow evening. I can't tell you what the number is, but I will say it's a record amount, so we're very excited about that. And again, if you're not able to attend the event, then it'll be mailed out in district-wide on Friday. Just looking ahead, because we have to plan ahead in order to be successful with these events, is the golf outing. Planning is underway. Again, the date is August 3rd at Ironwood, so please save the date there. It does tend to fill up quickly, so consider and think about the foursomes that you might take or might invite. They're most likely going to open registration for returning golfers in late March and then new golfers in April. So if you went previous years, you'll get first crack at going this year. A couple other things. We did welcome 2 new board members in the start of this year. So welcome to Gina Nordrum and Amanda Roddy, who you both may be aware of both of them and their involvement in the district. Janica Sabatnik has moved into the vice president role. That's another change. And exiting board members at the end of 2022 included Garrett Shesky, Faye Carrillo, and Kim Dove. And again, we thank all of them for their service and volunteer work for WEF. Annual sponsorships renewals are also pouring in with great success, and if you have a referral for either an event or an annual sponsorship, again, please get them connected with us. And I think that's all I've got.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions from anyone? All right. We'll move on to our next item on the agenda. Just a reminder to everyone that when we modified our policy committee operations this previous year, we did have the option for either the policy committee chair or the board president to bring some policies forward to different committees. I have added to the agenda for your consideration tonight a small modification of policy 5460, graduation requirements. Rest assured, students, does not impact your ability to graduate. This is specifically with respect to board member conferring of degrees and attendance at graduation. So if I think you all had a chance to review that, this is agendized as an action item, so I would just call your attention to the last page, fourth paragraph, where there's an additional sentence that has been added. And I will just clarify that it did occur to me last year while we were participating in graduation that there were a number of board members who had served substantial consecutive terms as board members and played a significant role in delivering the education that those students had received. And so I regret that I did not think to do this last year, but I thought it would be appropriate to ask you all to consider that board members whose full 3-year term expires in the month of April would be eligible to participate in graduation ceremonies at the conclusion of the said school year. Any comments or questions about that? Mrs. Kozlowski.
I motion to approve the modifications to policy 5460, graduation requirements as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Zenobia. Any further questions or comments? Mr. Como.
I appreciate this change. I think you're correct when you serve a number of years and you have an impact on the students over that time. There's many things that we do on this board. And probably the toughest thing is to decide to expel a student, and probably the most fun thing to do is to be at graduation. So I can appreciate this change, and hopefully I'll be able to take advantage of it if it does pass.
Thank you. Mr. Montijo.
I agree with Mr. Como. Excuse me, and I support the change. Just to echo his comments, graduation, it was it's just one of the most enjoyable moments, just pure happiness on the kids' faces, the families, the educators. You get to see everybody in just a little bit of a different light, and you get to see that transition. We live under this fallacy that, kids are minors until they hit 18, and then they somehow, graduate and magically turn into adults. But sometimes at graduation, you can kind of see it. You can see it. You can just see it. It's a great thing. And to have the board members be able to see that one last time, I think is a great thing. So fully support it. Glad you did it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
I definitely agree with the motion. I do want to give Mr. Como a huge gratitude because of his service here, and I do think that is the right thing to do, especially when a board member like him have served this district for years, and the students that have come in since kindergarten, he deserves the right to see them on graduation day, so I do agree with that. So thank you for your service, and I do agree with the future board members as well.
Thank you. I think we all feel the same way about those who left us last year. And again, I wish this had occurred to me. It was literally in that moment. There's some people that should be here that aren't here. So anyway, with that, I don't see any other comments. Sue, would you take the roll call, please?
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Karen Robertson.
Aye.
Corey Montiel.
Aye.
Patrick McCaffrey.
Aye.
Joseph Como.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Markel Moore.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. Thank you. All right, moving on to our consent agenda. Mr. Clark.
Yes, one gift tonight. South High School received $1,000 from James Newman to be used towards equipment in the weight room.
All right, thank you for that. That's very generous. As a reminder, your agenda includes various categories for approval. If any board member wishes to have an item set aside for separate consideration, we will have that opportunity. Included in the items for approval tonight are the decisions of the expulsion panel, which met on February 23rd, 2023. A confidential communication regarding the details of expulsions was in your Friday packet, along with the minutes included under item 1H. If any board member wishes to discuss this item, we have scheduled an executive session at the close of the regular meeting. Approval of the consent agenda confirms full board agreement with the expulsion panel's action. Also included are policies and bylaws 2271, early college credit program, 2271.01, Start College Now program, 5421, grading, and 9130.01, complaints concerning education materials and library materials. If any board member wishes to have an item set aside for separate consideration, they should indicate so at this time. Mr. Como.
Thank you, Dr. Piasek. I would like to ask that 9130.01 be discussed separately.
Thank you. No problem. Anybody else? Okay. Mrs. Robertson, will you please present the consent agenda for approval?
Thank you, Madam President. Earlier this evening, the Human Resources and Compensation Committee approved of 4 resignations, 10 retirements, and 2 leave requests. The information was provided in your packet. I move that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Seconded by Mr. McCaffrey. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay, Sue, would you take the vote, please?
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Patrick McCaffrey.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Markel Moore.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Joseph Como.
Aye.
Corey Montiel.
Aye.
Karen Robertson.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. Moving on to our superintendent's report. Dr. Siebert.
All right, thank you, Dr. Piasek. Just a few items for the board this evening. First, at your places is a handout for the WASB Day at the Capitol. That's coming up in 2 weeks, Wednesday, March 22nd. We have 2 board members, thank you, who are interested in attending with me, and we'll be able to engage with our legislators that day at the Capitol. And if anyone else has interest in attending, I know you're all busy people and that you have day jobs, and we respect that greatly. But if you have interest, just let Sue or I know by the end of the week, and we will coordinate the travel plans and registration and so forth. We also learned today that the first joint finance committee on finance, the public hearing for the 23-25 state budget, the first one is going to be held here in Waukesha at the Expo Center on Wednesday, April 5th. So I have had experience going to those. You get a 2-minute window to speak. Best chance to speak is if you go really early so that you don't wait most of the day in order to do it. If anybody has interest in attending that, I certainly would be attending and advocating for the School District of Waukesha and for public education in the state of Wisconsin. But if anyone else has interest, I'll spread some more of that information to you as it becomes more readily available and be happy to help you with that process as well. It's interesting, if nothing else. And then lastly, we did not have bright lights tonight, and I just want you to be aware that the reason is because we're saving it up for April. You heard from South some of the state and national recognitions. North and West also have a tremendous amount of state recognition. Some of them have been completed, some of them are still underway and taking place. So we will have all three of those amazing high schools with their students and athletic directors and staff coming to talk about all the amazing things that they've accomplished during the winter season at the April board meeting. So we'll look forward to that. And thank you. That concludes my report, Dr. Piasek.
Thank you so much. Lots of great things happening for our students. It's great to see. All right, beginning our committee reports. Our first committee tonight is the Policy Committee. Mr. Montijo, any updates for the board?
No updates. The Policy Committee did not meet. We anticipate a Neola update, I believe, about a month, Dr. Cook is indicating. So we should have a meeting, I believe, probably in May, and then a report at the June regular board meeting, please.
Okay, thank you. Next committee that's up is our Finance and Facilities Committee meeting given by Mr. Como.
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight we have one action item, 3 discussion items, and actually the approval of the West High School entrance. The finalized easement documents were not received by our legal counsel in time for our meeting on Monday, so no action was taken. This item will be agendized, though, in April, so we really didn't have one action item tonight. Moving on to our discussion items, though, the first one is our monthly budget report. Our open enrollment in numbers have not met our projections, resulting in a shortfall of $825,000. However, interest continues to be favorable, and that's something that hasn't been said, like, in years. So this helps us to offset the loss of the open enrollment. We will be bringing a budget amendment to you in the coming months to incorporate this activity. Otherwise, revenues and expenditures continue to be within the budgeted limits, and the district is operating in accordance with our approved budget. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. Our second item is our health insurance report. Mr. Clark provided an update on the accounting structure and current reserves for our self-funded health and dental insurance programs. The district is in the process of reviewing anticipated funding rate adjustments for the 2023-2024 school year. This information will be incorporated into our budget development process. Then, and our last item is an ESSER update. All of the ESSER funds have been assigned and approved. Teaching and Learning brought forth the last of the large category items last month. In board docs, you'll find a PowerPoint outlining how much of each ESSER grant has been obligated in the WISE grants and how much has been claimed. The committee will keep you updated on the spend down of the ESSER funds as we do, so as those occur. Madam President, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Como. All right. Our next committee is Teaching and Learning, and I will give the report for Teaching and Learning tonight. We had 5 discussion information items that appear on the agenda this evening, along with 1 action item. The action item is the Policy 9130.01, which was requested to be pulled from the consent agenda, entitled Complaints Concerning Educational Materials and Library Materials. And you've been provided a copy on your desk tonight that includes the modifications that were approved by the Teaching and Learning Committee last night on a vote of 3-0. As this is both a sensitive and important topic, we welcome discussion and potential action by the board tonight. So the floor is open for discussion. Mr. Como.
I wonder if it would be, maybe I'm just going to suggest that if we could highlight all the changes that we made last night. All of us had access to what the policy read prior to the meeting, but it's just been 24 hours since we've made some significant changes. So I don't know if Ms. Landish could highlight those?
I can absolutely do that, Mr. Como, yes. So everything stayed the same up to page 2, number 7. So that's where we had the most revision. You'll see we added number 8, so that's new language as of last night. Number 8 talks about the decision will not be reconsidered for a period of 3 years, and that is in relation to the 9-member committee. So if that team were to make that decision, again, the decision will not be reconsidered for a period of 3 years. Then the most modifications, Mr. Como, to your point, happened in that last paragraph. So I will read that out loud because we really kind of deconstructed and reconstructed that paragraph. So the new language and the most important changes were made in that last paragraph. The complainant may submit an appeal in writing to the board president within 10 business days, and the 10 business days matches language in another similar policy. The board committee appointed by the president will review the appeal in an open meeting within 60 days of receipt of the appeal. The committee will make a recommendation to the full board, and the decision of the full board is final and will not be reconsidered for a period of 3 years. So that's where the crux of the modifications were made.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Mr. Browski.
Yes, I guess I have a question about number 6. It reads, superintendent designee makes a decision, well, I guess let's back up to 5. The completed complaints concerning education laboratories form is sent to the superintendent designee for final review and consideration regarding the concern. So basically, committee decision goes to superintendent. 6 reads, superintendent designee makes decision regarding the complaint, communicates with the complainant, committee members, and the teaching and learning team, and documents the decision on the complaints concerning educational library materials form. The form is made public on the district website. It kind of seems like the superintendent can make a decision different than what the committee came up with, and maybe I'm just reading too much into that. I guess in number 6, I don't understand what decision the superintendent's making unless they can override the committee. So I just need clarification on that.
That's the way it's written. The way, I understand it to be the same thing. The committee is making a recommendation, just as the board committee is making a recommendation. The committee is making a recommendation, and then the superintendent is making the decision.
Okay. So I guess in those types of cases, well, I guess it depends how it goes. That might cause the complainant to appeal, or I guess not. Mm-hmm. Is any change to the, assuming the superintendent makes a change, is that communicated to the complainant, or just the final decision communicated to the complainant?
Excuse me, can I, Dr. Piasek, can I address?
Please, thank you.
Yes, both would be addressed and would be documented on the form as well.
Okay. So the complainant knows what's transpired, I guess, between the committee and the superintendent, or afterwards. Okay. Okay, and then I guess one last thing, that was a change from the current policy, because I think the current policy stated that the committee chair tells the superintendent and complainant the decision. So that was a change from the current policy, I think, the way I read it.
I don't believe so. So, my understanding, we haven't dealt with this during my tenure. However, in the old policy, it would go through the committee. A formal complaint could then be registered with the superintendent, and then the complainant may submit an appeal in writing to the board president within 10 days, it said in the old policy. So, Ms. Landish, do you have?
I just want to add to that, Dr. Siebert, on the old policy on page 5, there was always administrative authority written in for the superintendent. If you see that, Mr. Borowski. On the old policy, there was an administrative authority, strike through, the superintendent may order the removal of material which was previously approved. Just wanted to point that out to you.
Is it, all right, let me take a look, sorry. Okay. So you're saying essentially it's the same situation or same authority? Okay. I just need clarification on that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Zenobia?
I think I have more of a general comment, and I'm not sure that this policy or any policy can necessarily capture some of the content that's being discussed in these books. And so, if a book is reviewed and it's found to be age appropriate, then it will remain. If I read this correctly, it will remain for 3 years. If a book was found to be inappropriate, then it could be removed for up to 3 years. What we don't capture, I guess, is why the book was reviewed, what in the book brought the complaint in the first place. And the reason I'm saying this is because whether it's 3 years or 1 year or whatever it is, the next board would have to decide to allow something back or to review it again. But they may be starting from a point where they have no idea why that book or those materials were removed. So again, I don't know if that's anything we can capture in a policy. It is trying to be captured elsewhere. I mean, we do now have a list where people can go and look at what materials we're talking about. But I think for someone coming into this in the future and looking at something and saying, well, why are we moving this? Why are we getting rid of this? What's the problem? This policy doesn't necessarily force them to say, well, this is the progression that was gone through, this was the material that was reviewed, this is what was found to be actionable, if you will. So that's part of my concern. I know going through this whole process, we've been trying to address this on many different levels. So I don't know if, with those general comments, if I wasn't at the TNL meeting last night, and I apologize for that, but I wasn't able to be in the discussion there, so I guess that would be one thing I'd be curious about.
If I could point out to you, Mr. Zenobia, item 4 on the front page. The committee would gather to discuss the complaint and ultimately make a recommendation regarding the complaint. The team must develop a rationale for the recommendation and document it on the complaints concerning educational and library materials form. So that rationale for whatever decision they're making would be documented in a record that we would retain.
I think the complainant has to put pieces on that form too, is that correct, Ms. Landish?
Yes, I was going to just add on to that, Dr. Piasek. Number 7, Mr. Zenobia talks about the complaint is logged on the final concern form, and I have the form in front of me. It basically outlines, as Dr. Piasek mentioned, the additional information, the concern brought to the building, so that's typed up there, the date of the conversation, the possible resolution recommended from the complainant, as well as log of the concerns brought to the district with desired outcomes, committee members listed, rationale for recommendation from the committee, date the superintendent reviews it, final decision made, so it's all logged on the form transparently on the website.
And and toward that point, to what level, I guess, will it be documented? Is it, you read the report, you have to go read the book, or, I guess the sticking point for me in saying that, and it's very telling, when these books are read aloud, what we're talking about. And if the report captures that, that's great. I don't know if it will. I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at. On the face of this policy, it says, I like what it says, but it doesn't convey, or hopefully it will, but it doesn't necessarily convey what the reason was to take action. So I know that's what we're trying to get at. I guess my point is, will we actually get there with this policy? That's my concern. And I don't know that can be addressed any other way than what we're talking about here. So, and it's really more of a comment and a concern that I have going forward. Again, I know things have been transparent as best we can. There's been reasons made for why things were moved, and there was a short list of books that took action on. It doesn't convey there, unless you go to the book and read it, why. And I know this is maybe trying to move toward that. And so the reason I feel this is important is because, whether it's a year from now or 3 years from now, people are going to come and say, oh, well, why was this banned and whatever. And without reading why it was, no one's going to really remember.
It sounds to me like you're just looking for some level of specificity in the rationale.
Mr. Borowski, just a second. Mrs. Kozlowski was next. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
Thanks. So, Mr. Zenobia, I think it's an extremely valid point. We take a look at audit trails, and if I have to review the work in a year from where we started today, so when we were working through this, I specifically worked with Ms. Landis to help me just walk me through this. And so I walk through the form. So if I am a parent and I am raising a concern, the initial discussion would start with the form, a discussion with the principal, a teacher, and our principal, right? If I am doing and bringing a recommendation of a concern that I have, there are different pieces of affirmation that I'm using. One of them is going to be, I've read the book. As a parent, it's not required, because other pieces I'm doing is that I've read the extensive review of a book. There are several very good websites that parents are using today that are talking through reading reviews, understanding the content of these books. And in particular, one book that I used as a model had 16 pages of reviews with page numbers of the books, excerpts, wording, a direct quote from the book that would give me enough understanding of if we were, in the majority of the cases we're talking about, inappropriate sexual discussions that are just, they don't belong in our schools. So the start of it is really for the complainant and those who are logging it to make sure that the documentation on evidence supporting it isn't, I don't like the title of this book, or I don't like the picture of the book. It is more in depth as to, as a complainant, you do have an obligation to present your reason, and then we are given options as, are you looking for the book to be removed? Are you looking for this to be require parent access? Are you looking for this to be segregated, that it requires a separate approval? And I think as you work through the process and the form, we are effectively, in pretty deliberate detail, documenting the root cause in every step that we have outlined in the policy, why the decision was made with the supporting documentation, that in a change in a year, 3 years, 5 years, we would be able to look back at that same evidence that would be posted publicly, as we've discussed, to be able to understand that. So I had comfort with the amount of support and really how the form flowed with the details to make sure that it stood on its own, and that as someone else would be able to say with comfort, I understand why we went where we did.
Mr. Borowski, do you want to follow up?
Yeah, I guess I was just going to say, it sounds like your concern is a degree of specificity in the rationale for the decision. That seems to be the essence of your concern. I don't know if that's something that can be written into policy, or just, I guess, hope that that's done. But I think what Ms. Kozlowski has added is that whether it's the complainant's comments, or I shouldn't say whether, but it's the complainant's comments along with the rationale for the decision, that there should be enough there, hopefully to satisfy us all, and to allow people to reference. I mean, unless you feel there should be something written in there, like enough specifics to be referenced, years later or something,
Thank you for that, Ms. Kozlowski. I know you've done a lot of work on that. And I have a lot of confidence in where we're trying to move with this. I guess my experience has been is reports are as good as those that are writing them. And that's just based on the perception of the person that's doing it. And part of what I'm getting at is, will this process capture the true essence of why there's even a challenge? And it's not just for our school district, it's for every school district that's going through this. I know there's early attempts to try to rate books like they rate movies. And so while this process of ours may become, we'll present a paper trail, what real, in terms of what real value does it have, it has value, but, as a baseline of where we're starting from, what we're looking at, how others can duplicate this, if you will. Districts and people that are concerned about this would benefit from having some collaboration and some idea of, well, this book is this way and this book is that way. Again, the intent was never to try to, wholesale ban material. It's to make sure things that are grossly inappropriate are not in the hands of, the wrong age groups. So, I guess it's more of me voicing a concern going forward. Again, I know there's a lot of work that's been put into this. I'm grateful to everyone that has taken this up. So, thank you for that.
I'd like to maybe make a suggestion based on what I'm hearing you say. One consideration would be, I'm looking at item 5, whether we might want to add language, the completed complaints concerning educational materials is sent to the superintendent or designee for final review and consideration regarding the concern. We could potentially add there that the superintendent or designee is responsible for ensuring that a sufficiently detailed complaint and rationale is documented in the form. That would just mean that when it gets to that individual, they're saying, is there enough here that I can make a decision? That would be like, for example, an empty form comes your way. You could also set that process through other administrative guidelines too, but if that would, I don't know if that would satisfy some of your concern. Ultimately, people have to do the thing. Right. So I don't know if that adds any substance or helps ease your concern, but I thought that might be one place where, for rendering a decision, if the individual who's making it is ensuring that they have a sufficiently detailed explanation. Just a thought. Mr. Como.
And I didn't hear all the things you had said on the form, Jody, so excuse me if I'm going to repeat something here.
Sure.
So I think it would be important to capture accurately on the form the details, being brought forth for consideration. I think we should also provide what that report is from the 9-person committee. Have that online? Was that part of
Yes.
the form?
Yes,
And then the decision by the superintendent?
yes.
That's on there. I think we need to also do that if it does get appealed and brought forth to the board for consideration. I think we should continue that with any decisions that the board makes too. Just to have full documentation on that. I do agree with your suggestion for number 5 to have some review process done by the superintendent, and make sure that there is enough detail there. Because if there isn't enough, actually, that process should be done probably before we get the committee together, actually.
The question is whether that needs to be put to policy. It's a quality standard, which the community is going to hold all of us to. But I'm open to suggestions. Who receives the form when the form is submitted? Who's the designated recipient of the form? Is it the superintendent or designee?
Superintendent, as listed in policy, it's superintendent/designee. In most instances, it's assistant superintendent of teaching and learning.
So item number 5, based on what Mr. Como just said, item number 5 technically happens after number 1. Information is gathered from the complainant and school team and documented on the complaints concerning educational library materials form. Then, actually it occurs before number 3. Then the committee is formed. Number 3, prior to the committee meeting, members are provided with the complaints concerning educational libraries materials form and a copy of the resource. It might be appropriate to say.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Browski.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
If you have a good idea, I'd like to hear it.
Well, I think it's appropriate in 1. That seems to be the best place. That's when they're gathering the information before it even gets to the committee. So I like the statement that you came up with, and it seems like it's most appropriate there, right in the beginning.
Who's submitting the form, Mrs. Landish? The complainant or
So when this process is initiated, the complainant reaches out to any number of staff members in the district who then starts the form. It's in a shared folder upon which everyone has access. To remind the committee, we hope for an informal resolution as mentioned with the principal and/or librarian in this particular instance at the school. So what would be filled out would be the title, the information, the concerns brought to the building, and the potential resolution. Initially, all of that is logged for the assistant superintendent to see, the principal, and the library media specialist. And as the process goes, the specificity in the form is filled out. The longer you go, the more is filled out on the form. until a final resolution is made, then the document is posted on the website.
Mr. Zenobia.
If I may, so I guess what I'm getting at as far as what I'm trying to capture with language would be that somewhere in the form, someone is going to put on descriptions, page numbers, reviews. That's going to build with each step, or that's going to be done step one? Is that?
Step 1, title, author, publisher, reviews, grade level, information on circulation, concerns brought to the building, date of conversation, possible resolutions recommended. That's all in step 1.
And this is from a member of the public, or anyone could bring this, correct? Staff, board member?
As listed in the policy, paragraph 3, students, parents, staff, or residents of the district may register a complaint.
Okay.
The form itself is completed by the staff member. Is that correct?
Usually whoever the complainant reaches out to.
Mr. Como.
I need a clarification on what our old policy was. I just didn't have that in front of me right now, versus what we have now before us. The Committee of 9, was that work ever open to the public? Could the public come and view those meetings? Were those?
In our old policy, Mr. Como, I believe the consideration process was the only level of committee.
Okay.
And that, in the old policy, was the open session. Right, I mean, you and I were talking about when did the district ever use that old policy, or when did they have use of it?
Mhm.
Sue had given us the date, which I don't have in front of me, but 2014, that's the last time that old policy was used.
But that was a board meeting, right? Because it did come to the board level. But prior to that, the Committee of 9, they met on their own, and that was not open. Because it wasn't
Publicly
open.
posted open meeting.
Okay. And here we're proposing not to have that be open?
Not in this step of the process, that's correct.
Okay. I think we should consider keeping that open to the public, so they can hear the dialogue and the conversation. It just is more transparent, and, could be educational to those people who want to learn more about the topic. Otherwise, the public won't have a chance unless there is an appeal, and that was pointed out tonight by a constituent, and I can see that point. These are complex matters. This Committee of 9, there's going to be a lot of conversation, and how do you capture that? How are you able to capture that? And those who are interested could attend.
And we have language that we could use if we wanted to go back there My initial response to that is that we as elected officials have a responsibility to answer to the public and to be scrutinized by the public in public. Our employees are also employees of the public, but I think decisions like this unfairly, votes taken as such by these committee members in a public forum is, I don't personally think that that's fair to our employees to make them take those votes in public. I would be okay with having them, and maybe we could talk about a secret ballot or something, but I just don't think that's fair to put them on the spot like that, because that will lead to conflict among colleagues, and it's just not the culture that
Who
we want.
wants to serve?
Yeah,
I get that. No, I appreciate that insight. And I can actually see that. We do put ourselves out there, and I agree. We don't necessarily have to have our employees face that same type of scrutiny.
And so
I get that.
I think on one hand, what I like about the new procedure is that the employees, those professionals, meet to make that decision, and that decision is rendered as a collective decision. They're taking a vote, they're having a conversation, but what's coming forward on that form as a recommendation is representative of that committee.
Facing the public.
Yeah.
Yep, the public can see that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right, so there's the transparency, or there's the openness, if you will, the decision, which seems to be a good balance, in my opinion.
Mr. Montiel.
Thank you. To raise another subject, or I guess another sub-part of this subject, part of writing good policy is trying to poke holes in it. So I'm not trying to be a squeaky wheel or a problem child here, but under this policy, I think we may want to consider some sort of screening out process at the initial stage one. I'm trying to just flesh this out in my mind. Under this policy, as I read it, and correct me if I'm wrong, I hope I am, we could have 500 people file 500 separate complaints about books that they chose at random out of the school and say this book talks about too many chickens or it talks about too many elephants. And then they're going to meet with the principal or staff member, and that person will say, well, you're complaining about chickens and elephants, and they'll say, I don't care. I want this to go in front of the committee. So I don't know if we need to consider some sort of screening out process. What I would suggest, thinking of this now, and there's probably a better idea, is some sort of designee, maybe of the committee or the superintendent's designee, to initially screen these and then make the determination this is not at all relevant to the standards or the policy. And again, I'm trying to think how we do that, and then list those things that are screened out. And I don't know how we deal with that from a public policy. I just see that this could be, if I thought it up in the last 45 seconds, someone else could say, you want to throw a wrench in this process, here's your 500 complaints. Congratulations, we just booked up the last, 2 months of the school district for just to be abusive. So I don't know. I don't have a solution to that besides what I just thought of, and I don't know if that's a perfect one.
It's an excellent point. Your hourly rate would go down.
Yes. What do you bet?
It could go lower.
Yours is going up. Mr. Moore.
Oh, no, Mr. Montiel finished a little bit after. I raised my hand before because I was going to say, as elected officials, we have to respond to the public, as you said, and they do. If it's 500 complaints, they have the right to complain. They have the right to complain no matter how the number is, how much. People have the right to write thousands of complaints. They have the right to do that. But until he finished his last point, I rose my hand before that, so I rose it too soon. So I want to just jump in and say, no, they have the right to complain, no matter what it is about regarding the books. They have the right to do that, and it's our job as elected officials to hear those complaints. So, sorry about that.
Thank you. Mr. Zenobia.
To Mr. Montiel's point, and perhaps what might help weed out some of that and maybe satisfy what I'm trying to get at is, and I believe we're trying to do this in the spirit of what Ms. Kozlowski has said. Would it be possible to include an excerpt, photocopy, something to go into the file that everybody that reviews the file has to read it? Because I think when that happens, a lot of these challenges, should they come up, will take care of themselves. And a lot of the materials that have already been reviewed and that are going around, that are trying to find their way into our libraries, there are many examples. So I think I don't know if that language needs to be put in there, perhaps, but I think if that's the type or level of documentation, we could have at least an excerpt or two of what is being challenged and why. Then everybody that has to look at that in the future, I think will make a much more informed decision without having to do a lot of legwork to come to the rationale, if you will, of why this was done.
Mr. Montijo?
So thank you for that. I think maybe my mind is finally catching up with yours. So perhaps to address maybe both of our points, we could change step one, information is gathered from the complainant and documented on the complaints concerning education library materials form, which must include a specific site and quote to a portion of that book or resource, and then a reference to what policy it violates. If that would document the nature of the initial complaint in the beginning, I think it may address my hypothetical that people could complain about chickens or something ridiculous, and unless they can tie a specific section to a book or resource to a violation of a policy, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, maybe something along those lines? Is that what you're...
Yeah, perhaps. I think maybe just a simple excerpt of what is being challenged. I mean, it is a book, so it shouldn't be hard to do that. Would give anybody reviewing it the jumping off point of why this is even a question.
Mr. Montijo?
Sorry, my neck doesn't turn, so I can't see if other people are raising their hands.
Ms. Kozlowski will be next.
Okay. I guess maybe we need to back up then and say, look, students, parents, staff, or residents of the school district may register a complaint regarding library materials. That's how it's written in the proposal. Okay, great. The complaint could be it's the wrong color textbook, or it's the wrong color. It could be something ridiculous. So maybe it should be the complaint must cite something in that material that violates a policy or obscenity standard or something else. And I guess I'm repeating myself, but maybe I'm just fleshing it out in my own head. But I'll leave it, hopefully it was as clear as possible. But.
So our current policy, the current policy that's on the books, doesn't have any language that speaks to that concern that someone might flood the system. I do think that there needs to be, and whether that needs to be put to policy, I don't know, but some discretion around the specificity of the concern. And again, I think in the spirit of what we're doing here, this isn't about censorship, this is about appropriateness. So I think one of the notes that I made was potentially sample language or details of the content of concern. But we have to be careful, I think, with over-prescribing procedure into policy also. So that's, I think, for consideration. Mrs. Kozlowski.
Thank you. I think I'll try to address both Mr. Zenobia and Mr. Montijo. One of the pieces, if I take a look back, and Ms. Landis, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong because I can't pull up the handbook as of now. But if I take a look at the primary responsibility of how do books get into the library, right? And this is one of those pieces that we talk a lot about. It's much easier to get a book into the library than it is to remove it, because now we get the questions of First Amendment rights and intellectual freedom. But the goals that they are using to bring books into follow, they are part of a curricular design process. They are deemed appropriate, providing a balanced view of that. And Ms. Landis, there were 4 points that we talked about that I think point number 4 was that it does no harm to minors, and I think it was based on the statute 948 as to how we pulled in. But there is guidance, and I think we addressed 4 of the points that talk about if we were going to do this, and it really related to around the definition of obscenity, that we talked about how are we looking at what we are asking to take out. And one of those is that it is not harmful to minors, and it adds educational value, intellectual value, to the purpose of what our education is. And so within those, that is part of what we would talk about on the form, that when you give an option for them to say, why am I rejecting this, or what are my concerns with it, we have a few options as to how are we looking at the books as to based on how do they get in there, classifying them within that, and then making them document that. And so to Mr. Zenobia, I want to get back to the form, and I want to use the example that I talk about. So my brain works a lot in bullet points and flowcharts, right? So a lot of things you have to get through is walk me through where this process is, how am I seeing it? So if I am a complainant, what am I expecting? What do I need to provide, right? The audit really becomes on me, but then I'm also given options, right? We agree that we are not trying to ban or censor, but we are obligated to protect our children, age-appropriate and non-obscene materials. That is the role of what we are to do. Any other pieces of that? There are public libraries, there are many other areas that we can get a wider variety of things, but our obligation is student education and protection. Within the form, as I walk through the process, I brought my 16-page review. I would bring copies, and I would believe that that is absolutely included as part of my documentation, my viewpoint, my presentation to do that. Great conversations with district staff is to try and understand the opposing pieces of, but this is real life. Somebody is explaining this, or have you looked through the whole story of that, and having that dialogue with the staff before we get there and sharing both sides has been a nice place for us to really try to understand each other's perspectives. But as the process moves forward, I think the documentation form and package, as you're referencing, continues to grow. And it is very clear, especially in the books that we have talked about are being raised as complete inappropriate. We have not, since 2014, had a book come through where we didn't have almost agreement that what was being asked to be removed was far outside the boundaries of obscene. And so I think 2014, Alaska, I don't remember what it was, that was the last time where there was truly a debate and a great healthy discussion on the intellectual value that a book is providing. And I think those discussions are going to be far fewer, but to Mr. Montillo's point, right, are we going to be at a place where we have everyone wanting to discriminate? And I'm saying based on the policy, the qualifications on why, and the documentation, I think, supports that getting to a numerous value of high demand would be quickly limited within the first couple steps of the process.
Mrs. Robertson.
Thank you. On number 1, could we just say information is gathered from the complainant and school team, and may be, those 2 words added, may be documented on the complaints concerned, so if someone wanted to include it or has got their 16-page whatever, it is put into that folder?
That would seem to me that it would give us the option to not have the information attached, which would be of greater concern.
Okay.
Do you mean like additional information may be provided? This is a paper form, Google form.
It's a Google form, or no, excuse me, it's a, what's this?
It's a Qualtrics form. So we do have to be careful about photocopying pages of books, so that wouldn't be appropriate. But those attachments might be appropriate, if that's part of the complaint.
I just personally think that if anyone was disagreeing with a book that was brought forward and wanted to say something the opposite of what was brought forth, if they didn't do the homework themselves and actually read the book or look at the book or whatever and do the homework before they brought forth a complaint that a book was removed and couldn't cite it, then that's on them. I just don't see why it would have to be documented or why we're afraid of just moving forward like this. I get what you're saying, Anthony, Mr. Zenobia, but if you're afraid of the retribution or if you're just not wanting that backlash, anyone who wants to say that that book actually should be in the hands of students after it was removed, if they don't want to do the homework to look up why and see the pages for themselves or actually, dig into it before they bring it forth, then why are we even concerned about what they have to say?
I think I've probably misstated something. So in going on what you had just said, I would say the policy perhaps should say, and must be documented with content. Something to that effect, because what I want is a paper trail for people to see. And if this process continues and is followed as well as Ms. Kozlowski has written this or put time into this, one of the problems that we've had is, to your point, was differences of opinion, which we all have. But what we are trying to establish, I think, for the first time in policy now, is to document the concerns so that they are on paper, so that people have to, in the future, read what is being put in front of kids. And that process, as books are brought and challenged, that will begin to build a groundwork of what is the expectation. What are we bringing into our libraries and putting in children's hands that may be grossly inappropriate for them? And now we have some guidelines of what we've documented in these complaints showing. And I would really like these complaints. I would like to feel like any complaints that are done from here forward, and probably on the books that we've already taken action on, have this level of documentation so that someone can go and look at the 6 or 7 or 8 books and say, my God, yeah, this is terrible. Now we have a baseline, a documentation of what is the expectation of material that we want in the hands of children, which, I don't think should be in their hands, but this is the process we're working through. So I would think, and maybe thank you for clarifying this for me, was in number 1 should say, and must be documented with book content or excerpts or written explanation.
Mrs. Robertson is next.
Thank you. Could it say, instead of must be, could it say information is gathered from the complainant and school team and pages in question documented on the complaints concerning educational library materials form? If we just jot the pages down, because I actually needed to re-reference a book, and I looked up a book and said the name of the book and then in question because I had read it a while ago. And all of the complaints that I had before were all there. So really, all you have to do is do a search on a certain book and it will just tell you very clearly what is wrong with it. But if we don't want to actually do that step, it will be right in here. So those 3 words, pages in question, that way we don't have copyright issues or anything about photocopying actual pages. We have pages in question, so they can go right to the page.
Mr. Como and then Mr. Montijo.
Yeah, this is great discussion. I'm enjoying it, actually, and it does deserve the scrutiny that it's getting. I wonder if it makes sense for us to kick this back to committee. There's been a number of things that have been brought up tonight. Just a suggestion that we might want to have it go back to committee. Give us a little bit more time, some consideration of number of good points tonight.
Mr. Montijo.
Thank you. To address Ms. Kozlowski's points, which were excellent, I saw her comments more on the front end of what are the standards for screening books in or screening them out by staff, employees, what are the 4 standards, which I agree with entirely. I see this as more of a check and balance on that. What if something gets through? Someone, anybody, a citizen, staff, parents, students can say, well, I think this got through. This material violates those front-end screening standards. But what I'm worried about is abuse of that process, which I mentioned before. So what I'm thinking is if you would change step 1 in this proposed revision, strike and school team, replace that with who must specify what portions of that library material violates which specific board policy or policies. And document it, and to be, or must, excuse me, give me a second for my brain to catch up with my mouth. Which would be documented on the complaints concerning educational library materials form. So I think what I'm thinking is 1 should state information is gathered from the complainant who must specify what portions of that library material violates which specific policy, which would be, or which shall be, documented in writing on the complaints concerning educational. So it just puts it out there, saying, okay, this is specifically what my objection is, and it can't be about chickens or the color of the binding or the author is from Nebraska. It has to be something, okay, that's tied to policy. And I don't know why school team would be in there in the beginning. I think to Ms. Robertson's point that if someone's going to make a complaint, they should do the work, and they should specify what portions of the material is inappropriate. Unless I'm misunderstanding why school team was in there. I think the onus is on the person who has the objection to specify what, with specificity, citing what portion of the library material is inappropriate and what policy it violates. And then maybe have some sort of screening process. Unless they do that, this one's gone. Because what if we do get those 500 complaints about the color of the binding and the author's from Nebraska, there are too many chickens, I don't know. No public policy is perfect and no board policy is perfect, so that's just my thought, and I'll let it be at that.
I think Mr. Borowski wants to make a comment. I do just want to make a process consideration. Since we did not have the full T&L committee present last night, we're doing a lot of wordsmithing here. I think there's been a lot of really great suggestions. I know that just for purposes of administration, having a process to go forward with, that they would like us to get this done. But if we're not feeling like we're ready, or if some of those recommendations are not sufficiently covering all of the concerns that have been raised, which I'm hearing they might not, we may need to move this back to committee for reconsideration. Do you want to go ahead, Mr.
Just
Borowski?
one last comment, and hopefully this will move us forward in some way. So I think we're very close to taking a vote, so I guess I would hope we could, spend whatever short amount of time to do that before we decide to put it at committee. I appreciate the deliberation that the board is giving this. I mean, that's our job and everything. I also think that it's an indication of like the challenge in writing policy. You can't come up with every scenario that might happen, and as specific as you try to make it, people can still interpret things different ways. So we really have to look at the intent of the policy and the spirit of it and what it's trying to accomplish. I think it sounds to me like, Mr. Zenobia, if you can make a suggestion on what you think it should say to satisfy your degree of specificity that's needed, I would recommend that unless somebody else has an idea. Mr. Montiel, I appreciate your comments. I think the fact that, we haven't had something come forward in 9 years, I don't know that that's a significant concern of ours, is that we're going to be inundated with silly, complaints that we need to spend. I guess that it needs to be a concern in the policy. That's just my opinion. I don't think that's that significant. So I guess I would just look for Mr. Zenobia or somebody to suggest something specific, and if we are satisfied enough with that to come to a vote, we should try to do that. If not, then I guess we'll do something else.
Mr. Zenobia?
Yes, I would like to propose an amendment then to number 1.
So we don't actually have a motion on the
I'm
floor,
sorry.
so we can consider modification, yeah. Go ahead. Share what you're thinking.
So I would put after documented, to include but not limited to.
Which paragraph? I'm
sorry,
Item one.
number 1. So information is gathered from the complainant and school team and documented to include but not limited to pages in question on the complaints concerning educational library materials form.
Read it again, please.
After the word documented, to include, comma, but not limited to, comma, pages in question on the complaints concerning educational library materials form.
Since we're not quite to motioned with consideration yet, some language we might consider in place of what you said, and documented to include but not limited to sample language and pages and content of concern. Would that satisfy? Is it the same? Does it add anything? I felt like sample language might be also acceptable.
That would be fine.
Any thoughts about that?
Yep.
Mr.
I had
Como?
a different matter.
Okay. All right.
Earlier, I had made a suggestion that, for full transparency, that we would also add on the website any of the Board of Education decisions. So I'd like to see the whole, everything documented. So we would need to add a sentence. I haven't thought through what that sentence should be. But, I mean, basically, that should be part of the, maybe not, well, if the form is the formal documentation, I guess it would be part of the form. So if it did get appealed, we should know, we should have something documented on that. And then if it went to a board committee, what that board committee decided, and then if it goes to the full board, which it should probably, it would then, the board committee would make the recommendation to the full board, and then what was the full board finding, so. So I don't know if we need to expand that, if that just is part of the form. The complainant in number 7, we say the complaint is logged in the final library book concern and da-da-da-da-da. On the form, maybe we just need to add a sentence that if an appeal is made, maybe something like, if an appeal is made, that should be documented along with the actions of the board.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
So for clarification, Mr. Como, the form itself walks through the entire process as we outlined here. From the start, where the initial complaint was made, was it resolved, was it appealed, superintendent review, committee review, board review, it walks.
Okay, so it's there? You're telling me it's there now in the form?
So, as I've been taking notes this evening, the appeal process currently was not documented on the form. So, when this was originally suggested by Mr. Como, I exactly wrote down what you just said, that we would add 2 boxes to the end of the form that have appeal to board, add documentation at the end of form, decision of the board committee, rationale, final decision of the board. Those can be implemented right onto the form. Also, as Mr. Zenobia was suggesting earlier on in the conversation, the details around the excerpts into the form, cite, quotes. Mr. Montijo recommended if there was perhaps document board policy violation, pages in question from Mrs. Reinacek, all those things I have notes to add onto the form to go with Dr. Piasek's just kind of overall comment about quality standard. So I guess it's up to the board whether or not you want the entire language of the form to be written into policy. I don't think that's your intent.
I don't think so. I don't think we
Yeah.
have to, but I might be, just like as in number 7, where we say that the complaint is logged, so on and so forth, that whole sentence is linked in the form. I wonder if we should just add one sentence at the end, so we say the decision of the full board is final, and maybe something like, and will be properly documented on the form, and will not be considered for a period of 3 years.
Yeah, we could.
And we don't need the first and, I guess. The decision of the full board is final. It will be documented on the form. And the decision will not be reconsidered for a period of 3 years.
Mr. Montijo.
Thank you. Thank you. Good work. I think that alleviates my concerns, and I think Mr. Borowski's point is well made. Can't make perfect policy. I don't see any reason to hold this up from a vote tonight. So I move to adopt the revisions to policy 9130.01 as orally amended and just presented.
Second.
Okay, for purposes of clarity, I'm going to ask that we go through all of those modifications again. At this point, I'm noting that there's a modification to item 1 on page 1, and there's a requested modification to the paragraph ending with the text 3 years on page 2. Were there any other modifications that you all felt had been proposed as part of that motion?
I did not.
Okay. So why don't we start with the language on item 1? Information is gathered from the complainant. I want to clarify for Mr. Montijo and Ms. Kozlowski, you were intending to leave the language and school team? Okay. Information is gathered from the complainant and school team and documented to include but not limited to, comma, sample language and pages and content of concern, comma, on the complaints concerning educational library materials form.
Correct.
Correct. On page 2, the sentence ending with make a recommendation to the full board, ending in period. Mr. Como, can you reiterate the language that you wanted to see there?
I didn't write it down.
Okay.
Jody, did you capture it? I thought you were writing it as...
I had a little more than what he had recommended because I was going to make a recommendation, but no, because I want to make sure that I'm capturing what Mr. Montijo had motioned.
Right.
So please, what you captured, Jim.
What I thought Mr. Como was saying was the last sentence in where you just read, the decision of the full board is final, comma, will be documented on the form, comma, and will not be reconsidered for a period of 3 years.
Yes. Yeah, that's the essence of it, yes.
That's correct. That's my motion.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any comments, questions, concerns, or possible modifications to that? Seeing none, Sue, would you take the roll call, please?
I'm sorry, I think it needed to be seconded, Madam President.
It was seconded by Mrs. Kozlowski.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
That's why I'm here.
Markel Moore.
Aye.
Joseph Como.
Aye.
Corey Montijo.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Karen Robertson.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Patrick McCaffrey.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye. Passes 9-0. Thank you all for a productive conversation. All right. We are only on the first discussion item for teaching and learning. So we had 5 discussion items at teaching and learning last night. The first information item is an update on common school funding. The list of book titles acquired in February and the financial information for purchases of library resources were included for the committee review and discussion. It was recommended last night that this update move from a monthly update to a quarterly update, moving forward for the committee and the board. We also discuss assessment of reading readiness. Per state statute 118.016, the board is required annually to approve the tool to assess early reading readiness, specifically in grades 4K through 2nd grade. The PALS assessment is being retired, which requires identification of a new assessment resource. Jen Gennerman, District Instructional Data Specialist, and Stephanie Merrill, a school psychologist, explained the different assessment options that were evaluated in the process involving consultation with a variety of educators, including our special education staff. FastBridge was identified as a tool that can be used for both our early reading assessments for K through 2, as well as our progress monitoring tool for structured interventions for both reading and math district-wide. Currently, AimsWeb is used for progress monitoring, but can also be replaced by FastBridge for students through 5th grade. After careful consideration, the FastBridge assessment system is the recommended progress monitoring tool. Use of FastBridge will allow the district to reduce the number of assessment systems for teachers and students. And this recommendation does require board action, so it will be coming back in April for a vote by the committee. All right. The third item was an update on the elementary math curriculum pilots. Melissa Yao, Director of Elementary Learning, and Rose Palmer, Elementary Math Coordinator, shared an update on the K-5 math pilot. This was the second presentation in the series of elementary math curricular review process. Next month, a team from the pilot will present as a discussion item at the committee. The goal of the elementary math team is to request board approval of the recommended resource in May. Sample pilot resources are available in the room adjacent to the boardroom. There's bags prepared for everybody, for anyone who would like to review those materials. I'm going to say this again, but between now and the time that we review these materials, we'll go through our board reorganization and some changes to committees. So I would request that everyone take the time to familiarize yourself with the teaching and learning materials that we'll be looking at as a committee for those decisions. Any questions about that? Okay. Next item is the secondary science curriculum update. We are in phase 1 of the curricular design process. High school science was represented by Erica Yoss, the district K-12 science coordinator, who joined us to present the achievement data and the family survey results that will be used to inform the recommendations and adoption of new secondary science curricular resources that go even beyond the AP courses. The timeline for research and implementation was discussed along with the next steps, including piloting those resources during the 23-24 school year. Questions about science? All right. And then, just so we didn't miss any subject areas, we also talked about social studies last night. Rachel Herman, the Director of Secondary Learning, highlighted the work of the secondary social studies teachers as they work toward new curriculum implementation next school year. Additionally, the updated course syllabi for the following courses were shared. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade social studies, human geography, world history, U.S. history, and criminal justice. The team aims to seek approval of those course syllabi from the board at the May or June Teaching and Learning Board meeting. So again, I would ask all returning board members, congratulations, Mr. Como and Mrs. Robertson, you don't have to look at these materials, but if all returning board members would be reviewing those materials in the current Teaching and Learning Subcommittee, since those assignments would be changing, I would appreciate that. Any questions about that?
Don't know if I can handle that.
You can help. All right, that concludes the Teaching and Learning Committee report. Our next meeting will be held on Tuesday, April 4th at 6 p.m. here in the boardroom. All right. This is the longest committee report ever. You're welcome. Let's see. I lost my script. Okay, the next committee that is on the agenda is an easy one. Student Services Committee. Mr. McCaffrey.
Thank you, Madam President. I have no report this evening. Our next meeting is March 21st, 6 p.m. in the boardroom. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. You win. Next committee is Human Resources and Compensation Committee, which will be presented by Mrs. Robertson.
Thank you, Madam President. First, we're going to go to our action items. The approval of recommended candidate and the contract for the position of Deputy Superintendent of Student Services. The administration is recommending Jennifer Gennerman for the position of Deputy Superintendent of Student Services. The strengths identified by the interview team during the debrief included data-driven, organized, strong communicator, current work on closing the achievement gap, background in special education, strengths in creating implementation plans, collaborative problem solver, and process and systems driven. Jennifer has excelled in her current role in the School District of Waukesha and built solid relationships while enhancing data literacy with our administrative team. She is a positive and dedicated leader. Jennifer is a current School District Waukesha employee. She has been in the instructional data specialist area for the School District Waukesha since June 2022. Prior to coming to the School District of Waukesha, she was the Director of Advancement and Analytics for the Whitnall School District, the Director of Continuous Improvement and Assessment for the West Bend School District, and the Instructional and Data Specialist for the Muskego-Norway School District. Jennifer has also been a special ed teacher and instructional coach. She earned a BA in Special Ed from UW-Oshkosh, a Master's of Education in Curriculum and Instruction from Carroll University, and she completed the Superintendent Licensure Program at Concordia University. Jennifer's resume and contract were provided in your packet. Salary and benefits will be according to the middle management policies. Mrs. President, I move to approve the recommendation and contract of Jennifer Gennerman for the position of Deputy Superintendent of Student Services.
Thank you. I'd be looking for a second to Mrs. Robertson's motion.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Moore. Thank you. Any questions or comments? I think we've all had the privilege of working with Jen. Mr. Como?
Yeah, just during our committee meeting, we had a little bit of discussion on this, and we wish all the luck in the world to our current Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Cook, moving on to Mukwonago. And as we know, he's done a lot of heavy lifting in this district. And you had made some comments, Dr. Siebert, on how if this passes, you would be, onboarding Jen into the committee and maybe looking at dispersing responsibilities. Could you maybe go through that a little bit? Because we have set in our head what Joe has been doing, and that will possibly be changing a bit, so.
Sure. I mean, Dr. Cook has been here a long time. He's grown tremendously, and I've really appreciated working with him. Coming into a new opportunity at Blair with a new individual in that position, which is a close partner of mine and a valuable member of our cabinet-level administrative team. We have about 3 months, assuming you approve this, to do some transition work with Dr. Cook in the Student Services Department, and then also to get some new employees within the Student Services Department. With the retirement of Patty Hovel, for example, was approved this evening in HR. So there will be some opportunities in that department as well. And so I think that will give us a nice opportunity as a cabinet as well as a Student Services team over these next 3 months to figure out roles and figure out how we share the workload and do the best job we can to move the school district of Waukesha forward as a cabinet-level administrative team.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate sharing that.
You bet.
Anything else? Mr. Borowski? No, okay, I thought you motioned. Okay, Sue, would you take the vote, please?
Karen Robertson.
Aye.
Markel Moore.
Aye.
Joseph Como.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Corey Montiel.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Patrick McCaffrey.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. Mrs. Robertson.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of comp time revisions. Suggested revisions to comp time were brought to the February Board of Education meeting for review. Should it say February? Should it say February? Is that correct, February? It should not say March. Sorry, Sharon. It just popped out to me.
We brought it in February and then
Okay,
again.
for the first time.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Revisions are available for review in board docs. Mrs. President, I move to approve the revisions to comp time as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Kozlowski. Is there discussion about this? Mr. Montijo.
Thank you. This came up in committee prior to the general board meeting, or regular board meeting just today. I'll make my comments just because that committee meeting is not televised. We received emails, the committee did, from some school district employees. I think there was 4 emails or so, 3. And they had a number of good points. A few of them asked for more time to try to present their opinions, whether it's a presentation, formal presentation, or contact that they didn't quite say, but they said, look, we just need some more time to get organized to present their opinions on this proposed revision. I spoke in support of that. I asked Mr. Clark, CFO of the district, if there was any time necessity, or time crunch to get this done. I don't want to speak for you, but my recollection is your answer was that it's not a pressing financial matter. Is that correct?
Yeah, we would need action in April for the timeline of implementation, but there's nothing that would require an action tonight.
Okay. So I'd ask the full board to give those individuals time to gather their thoughts and present whatever positions they have, whether it changes the board member's decision or not, I don't know. As I mentioned in the committee, what terrifies me in this position is the things, I don't know what I don't know. Perhaps they have an opinion or a suggested change or some sort of revision that would change my thoughts on this if we had a vote today. So that's my thought. And again, I apologize, I missed the status where we're at. Was there a motion in a second?
Yes, there was.
So I will vote against this for that purpose. Not that I'm against the proposal financially or fiscally, but I'm going to vote against it because I would prefer to give those individuals time to come back. and I'd prefer to bump this off another month.
Mr. Moore, thank you.
I would agree, Mr. Montiel. I think I need more time too, due to the emails that I received as well, and some today as well on my desk. So that's just my thoughts, so thank you.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
Thank you, Mr. Montiel. We have a difference of opinion, and from a holistic view, I want to be very clear as to what we are trying to do. So the current staffing in an hourly model would say that any hours over 40 hours are paid out at overtime, which is time and a half currently rate. The current benefit offered to these employees is that they have an opportunity to bank up to 240 hours of this overtime rather than receiving the cash at the time that those hours are earned. Like many other corporate settings in the world right now, as we take a look at compensation, the hourly rate that these are earned today is very different than cashing out 240 hours if they continued to maintain 240 hours for multiple years. It is not uncommon. It is a good fiscal responsibility to ensure that we are managing overtime. Our employees have, this isn't a loss of a benefit. They are going to be compensated for all of their hours worked. The difference is just in how we are doing it. And I think 80 hours is fair. I think it's reasonable. I think it's industry standard. I do appreciate Mr. Montiel's point, when we're taking a look at a staffing model where staffing is shortages. I think we see that across industry lines. That's not new, and it's something that all industries are trying to battle. But as a district fiduciary responsibility, we need to take a look at our balance sheet. We need to take a look at what is acceptable. And I also expect that our employees are management of their own fiscal resources and timing of that. This is a wise choice for our district to move forward with.
Mr. Como.
Yeah, I look at this as a retaining good employees. It's a retention strategy. I do think 240 is way too much. Is 80 the right amount? I don't know. But I do think that this could potentially be a differentiator for our district. And I think if we delayed this decision at the board level for another month just to hear what our employees have to say, I think that goes a long ways with building relationships. And at least let's hear their thoughts. One of the things I was really proud of this district, when Act 10 was enacted, this board chose to take a number of years and to talk to all the stakeholders to develop our handbook. And we could have developed a handbook that just, basically done it in a month or two, or taken something off the shelf that WASB had presented to us. But we've been known, I think, to have those discussions. There's ongoing discussions that the superintendent has with various groups, and I would just like to continue in that spirit. So I'd like to see this delayed for a month. So I'll be voting no, at least at this time. The concept I agree with, but I would like to get some input from our employees.
I have a question for Mrs. Thede, and I'm just curious, when did the individual staff members become aware of the change?
I met with the Buildings and Grounds crew, I want to say it was Wednesday.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, it could be a day off one way or the other, but it was last week. And at that time, I mentioned if they had issues, they could email me and that I would forward them on to the board, and those were the 3 that I received.
And when were these received?
The last one today. Yeah. The other 2 were yesterday.
I come from a family of trades, worked with a lot of good people in the trades for many, many, many years. To that end, I can appreciate that flexibility does not always come with blue-collar jobs. And also that it becomes very difficult for employers to efficiently schedule employees when too much comp time accumulates. And so there are pros and cons that we need to consider on both sides of this. I would like the opportunity to read through what the employees had to say. But I also understand, I shouldn't say but, and I also understand from a district operations perspective that 240 hours makes it very, very difficult to manage staffing appropriately. Mr. Como.
And I'm not saying that, so I just want to hear what they have to say. I think it needs to move off of 240, perhaps down to 80, maybe 120. Maybe there could be a graduation between years. But I would just like to hear what the employees have to say. I have no qualms with what we're trying to accomplish. I think we have to. I think we have to change this. I just would appreciate to hear their voice.
Mr. Moore.
Yes, and I agree with Mrs. Kozlowski and Mr. Como. I do think 240 is a lot. I was just stating that the emails that I had received was very recent. And as Mr. Clark stated, that they were notified last week, so some of the emails that I gotten was just recent. And I just didn't want to move forward without, knowing what exactly, when they were informed and what their concerns were. So I'm not against it. I just didn't know what was going on because of the emails that I had received, which was very recent. So I do think 240 is a lot, but I also think that, district operation, and I also think that, like Mrs. Kozlowski said, fiscal responsibility is key as well. So I was just asking for more time so that I could, we as a board could take more look into it, and also, like Mr. Como said, hear from the employees. So I was just trying to state that case.
Mr. Montijo.
Thank you. I'm just trying to think through the logistics of this. If we vote this up or down, but if we potentially vote it down for the purposes of having more time, it kind of doesn't get us to where we need to be. We'd have to, I guess I would move to table this discussion until next month. I don't recall. I know I just did this in the HR committee. I believe I can do that at this point, even though it's a motion. So
There's an active motion on the table. You could make a motion to table it.
All right.
There would not be discussion about that, so we would need a second.
All right. I'd move to table this discussion until the April 2023 regular board meeting.
Regular board meeting, not the HR committee.
I'm sorry, HR committee. Correct.
Okay.
And then bring it in. Well, it would therefore then have to go in front of the regular board meeting.
Okay. There's a motion to table the discussion and return it to the HR committee meeting in April.
I second that.
Seconded by Mr. Como. Sue, would you take the vote, please?
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Markel Moore.
Aye.
Karen Robertson.
No.
Carrie Kozlowski.
No.
Patrick McCaffrey.
Aye.
Joseph Como.
Aye.
Corey Montijo.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye. Passes 7-2. So we will move this discussion back to the HR committee in April 11th. Thank you, everyone. Mrs. Robertson.
Thank you. And the last item is the approval of the 2022-23 school calendar revision. The calendar has been revised to include an additional day, Day 5, for snow makeup. The revised 22-23 school calendar is available for review in board docs. Mrs. President, I move to approve the 2022-23 school calendar revisions as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. McCaffrey. Thank you. Any questions or discussion? All right, Sue, would you please take the roll call vote, please?
Corey Montijo.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Patrick McCaffrey.
Aye.
Karen Robertson.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Markel Moore.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Joseph Como.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye. Passes 9-0.
Madam President, that concludes my report.
Thank you. All right, we made it through our committees. We are now at the other business portion of our agenda. Are there any recommendations for future board or committee action or discussion items? Mr. Zenobia.
Yes, thank you. I would like the administration to review our access and training on defibrillators in all of our buildings. There's been an increase, it seems, among students having issues, not only student athletes, but other students. There was a case where spectators at a local event had a situation, I think at a high school not long ago. So I'm sure we have these devices everywhere where they are needed, but I would just like, in maybe a overabundance of caution, to make sure that we do have them everywhere they're needed and people know how to use them. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. We do have a need for executive session. We have several needs for executive session tonight. We do not need item B that is listed, but we do not need item C either, correct? Okay, so we do need items D, E, and F. Mr. Moore? Okay, thank you. Go ahead. D, E, and F.
Thank you. I make the motion to adjourn to executive session per Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent C, to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data or any public employee over which government body has jurisdictions or exercises responsibility, teacher compensation. I make the motion to adjourn to executive session per Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent F, to consider financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data or specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems or investigations of charges against specific persons, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations. Specifically, to consider a complaint filed against district personnel under School Board Policy 9130. I make the motion to adjourn into executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 19.85, Parent 1, Parent F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary considerations of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where Parent B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, or involved in such problems or investigations, specifically to discuss the conduct of a district resident during the recent school board meetings and to consider measures to address such conduct.
Very nicely done, Mr. Moore. Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Commercial level motion? Seconded by Mr. Borowski. Thank you. Sue, would you take the vote, please?
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Karen Robertson.
Aye.
Corey Montiel.
Aye.
Patrick McCaffrey.
Aye.
Joseph Como.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Markel Moore.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye. Passes 9-0. I do want to thank all of you for a very professional and collaborative conversation tonight. We had a lot to do. We have a lot more ahead of us, but I really appreciate the dialogue and the thoughtfulness. With that, our next meeting is Wednesday, April 12th here in the boardroom, and our open meeting is adjourned. Thank you.